I'm just wondering, is AI just the natural evolution of digitalization? As technology becomes more and more powerful, that we could utilize AI, to automate more in what we do. Yeah. Do you see any intersection between AI and building information modeling, for example?
Certainly. I think there's, as with all digitization, there is a natural intersection. You could use AI, for example, to look at the models. If you give it a certain criteria, it could pick out the issues that you're looking rather than doing it on a manual basis.
Yeah, so this idea, I think Autodesk talk a lot about this, make it before you make it for real. In other words, make it digitally, make sure that everything kind of works before you go to site. This is possible, no? That the algorithms could literally do that check, that sense check of the model to ensure that it's compliant with building regulations, that the clash detection is done. I'm sure this is something that the automotive and the aeronautical industries have worked on extensively, that before they go to build their vehicles, that they're fully checked and double checked, and that they have very smart AI to work on this, no?
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for that. I think the issue will be training the AI, because the AI is only as good as the training materials. One of the issues we have is that the construction and design industry isn't great at having complete data sets. So if you train the AI on hundreds of projects, you're relying on the fact that those are complete. But at Buro Happold recently used various algorithms. One of the things we have used it for as well is having design options. If you have a very complex build, something like Museum of the Future, how do you work out how you have various options that work? And that makes it much faster because it's helping you do those calculations. But I think there is that potential, but we need to get better at our data management to enable the AI to do its job.
Very good. And again, I'd just like to encourage those of you that have joined us this afternoon to put any questions you have into the platform so that I can make reference to them. So the big question must be, how can we coexist with machines that inherently are just doing what they've been told to do, or they don't have the human values that we have? Is that one of the big issues here?
Ethics is a big thing when it comes to AI. So there's a lot of concern that because AI is learning from available information off the internet, it's found that there's certain bias, that some AI it's sexist or tends to be veered towards a certain gender or certain images. And we have to bear that in mind. Those certain aspects arguably are less prevalent in, say, doing a design, but we need to be conscious of what is the information we're feeding into the AI, assuming we're the ones training it. It's our own AI system. If you're using a publicly available AI, you need to know that it may be giving you completely rubbish results because it's been taught by rubbish information or miscalculations. So it's I think that will be very much trial and error. I saw a report that said that ChatGPT's answers are getting more and more inaccurate because the data that's being fed into it is worse and worse. So again, rubbish in, rubbish out, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the premise of your presentation was to balance, is it a panacea or is it a risk? I mean, is there a threat here to construction, or is it an opportunity?
I wouldn't say it's a threat any more than when we had email and people said, "Oh, but we have fax machines," or we have we had 3D software and people said, "What's wrong with the drawing board?" It's a tool to enable us to do things better. However, if we use it as a panacea, saying, I can just go on holiday now because AI can do my job for me. I think that's where the risk is. It's seeing it to supplement and augment what we do rather than replace it.
Yeah. And you talked about the case law that's going through the US courts. Do you see this happening on this side of the world as well? Have you seen any cases yourself in, say, the built environment, legal space?
It's still very early days. In terms of copyright, the reason why it's going through the US courts is the big companies which own like Getty Images are all US based. But depending what the results are, I'd expect to see the same worldwide. The issue as well is a lot of the AI companies are also US based. I would expect it to happen over time, but it may be complicated because looking at, say, an image, and someone says, well, you clearly based that image on my design, which was on my website. And they say, well, I know I didn't. It just happens to look similar. And it will be a very painful, long-running dispute that isn't going to benefit anyone.
So it's very early days at the moment, is what you're saying. So I wonder if I may, unfortunately, Leon is not with us. He's at the Building Smart International event in Norway. So you're the only person we can ask questions of, so apologies about that. And I know you were online for some of my presentation, and I know you've worked extensively. I know the work you did in your in the Winfield Rock Report and so on. But this whole area of sort of cultural change and contracts, does AI intersect with that also? We've heard about blockchain in the past. We've heard about smart contracts. What do you see unlocking the real potential in construction, and what sort of contractual and procurement vehicles most fit?
When it comes to contracts, there's a lot of offers out there for automated contract checking, filing, doing reviews. We're doing an extensive search of and review of all of these to see how they can help. I would say, as far as we can tell, a fair number of them are smoke and mirrors at this stage. So the lawyers' jobs are safe. But where they, I think, as the technology develops, where they will help is, say, a lawyer will take, say, 3 hours looking at a very long contract. Using a particular AI technology that gets cut in half because the AI pulls certain information out for them. They don't no longer have to read it word for word, but the lawyer still provides the thinking time, in the same way as using any sort of 3D software means you can reduce your time in terms of design and modeling. So there's a lot of potential there, I think, in terms of contracts, but again, it's relatively early days in implementing it. Some of the technology out there is very, very good, but it's rightly aimed at helping the lawyers. I was at a conference in Berlin at the end of last week. And the second day was all about AI, and a lot of it was exactly that, contract management. And the general conclusion was that at some point we should be able to push a button. The AI gives us a RACI report, says these are the key issues, and then the lawyer can make a decision about those.
Right. So we're talking about, I mean, I think we have a presentation tomorrow on that, in that kind of the use of technology in adjudication, for example, because it can be very it can be very costly just mining through all the data and all the evidence.
On that, it may interest people. There's been a number of news articles of judges across the world using AI to help them with their decisions, and pros and cons of that. But that's happening worldwide as well. So that's another aspect of where it could maybe help.
we're also seeing, I mean, I'm an educationist, we're also seeing lots of examples of AI helping students prepare projects and so on and so forth. So it's it's a real challenge. There's an awful lot of talk at the moment about off-site construction, modern methods of construction. Are we kind of moving towards a situation where the contractor, the manufacturer, the supplier, that there's going to be, that we need to maybe have a single point of responsibility where the designers are acting for and on behalf of the constructor, the manufacturer? And that's really would simplify things more, because it's been well spoken about in the industry. We're very fragmented. Every time we start a new contract, we have a new site, we have a new design team, a new contractor, and that we really need kind of but having more single responsibility will provide better integration. Would you agree to that, or do you think this is what needs to happen in construction?
I think we already have that with design and build.
Yeah.
There's very few, there's some parts in the world where traditional build is more common, but generally clients like design and build for exactly that reason. They have one point if something goes wrong. Where it comes to offsite manufacturing, modern methods of construction, one of the complications can be that the designers get on board early before the contractor has been selected. Contractor gets selected, they get novated over.
Yeah.
But then at that point, they might choose the manufacturer. And it's a question of, well, can your designs now be built by this made by this manufacturer? What if they can't? Not because there's anything wrong with the designs, it's just this particular manufacturer doesn't do it that way, and you can't hand it over. There are complexities where does the manufacturer report into the contractor and the designers report into the contractor, or does the client retain some direct contact with one or all of them? So I think we are very much still in the realms of single point of contact, because obviously it's a lot easier for the client.
Yes.
But it's just more parties possibly sitting under the lead contractor, lead designer.
I know I made reference to the new roadmap for MMC in Ireland, and certainly their preferred procurement option is design and build. That's something that seems to be, coming to the fore. So just to wrap up, I mean, do you believe that the intellectual aspect of BIM has been has been addressed? Is it still a big issue, the ownership of the BIM model at the end of the day?
The ownership of the BIM model, I think one of the problems I see in contracts is that it doesn't split up the elements of BIM model. So the model will have the objects, the existing data, the new data you can produce from it. It'll have the model itself, you'll have the federated model, you might have some coding behind it, all those different parts. However, a contract will often say all copyright in everything goes to the client, or it might say all the client gets a copyright license in everything. That may not actually be possible because, say, the objects are licensed from a manufacturer, or they are certain templates within a organization specific to them. They don't want to give them away. And I think we need to be, people may need to educate their legal team or the people doing their drafting about the different parts they want to keep or the different parts they don't have copyright on. And you can't expect the lawyers to understand this. They're not technical. That's not their area. And I think those conversations need to start happening.
Very good. We have a question in from Ankur Mitra here. The cost factor of adopting AI is potentially huge, given only a few big companies can benefit from it. Does it potentially alienate smaller contractors and subcontractors in the future?
I don't think that the cost necessarily is very large, particularly because You have some free, publicly available things which you could use for non-confidential information, but Microsoft and other organizations are intending to build in AI capabilities into their software. So it won't cost you much more or any more to have that facility. I think if you want an all singing, all dancing AI specific to your company built from scratch, that will cost a lot. But I think because it's so popular, there's a real race to offer various potential fixes and at various cost ranges.
Okay, so just maybe one of the last questions I want to ask is, what advice would you give public sector authorities in regard to BIM adoption and use of BIM in public works contracts? I mean, I've heard, there's some great work going on over in the UK with David Mosey and his team with the FAC1 contract and so on. Is there any advice you'd give, anything we could learn from, say, from the UK, when I know you're based, from that point of view?
I think when it comes to BIM, it's worth adopting the ISO 19650. It's internationally adopted. It's gone through the ringer from various parties. It has a suite of guidance. It makes it easy. There is a standard form document, contract document that you can easily attach and just adapt it to local laws. I think that would be the best. I'm an advocate of using the contracts that you're familiar with. Just because you do BIM, you don't have to use a new form of contract. It can be built into what you have. The thing that people fail to do, however, is do BIM but not mention it in the contractor scope, or the contract just says, do some BIM, use Revit, I want 3D models. You really have to lay out what your expectations are. So 6 months down the line, as a client, you don't say, where's all the things I thought I was paying for?
And how are they dealing with that, say, in JCT contracts, NEC contracts in the UK?
So the JCT contract has a supplement which in effect says insert a BIM protocol.
Okay.
And we also in 2019 wrote a JCT BIM best practice note, which goes clause by clause through the JCT and says this is how it's impacted by BIM. Not that you have to amend it, but you understand how it's being interpreted. But the general advice from the JCT is insert the ISO 19650 protocol as a contract schedule. The NEC is very similar. They issued a guidance note which explains how you insert the ISO 19650 information protocol. Because NEC doesn't have contract schedules, it's slightly more complicated that you have to insert it in different ways. But they also have done some webinars to explain that further. So there's a lot of explanation on how you do it.
And just before we come to another question from the audience there, quick question on the UK BIM framework. So is the UK BIM framework just sort of, is it a requirement? Is it just good practice? Because I know a lot of UK contracts make reference to the BIM framework, no?
So the construction playbook, the UK government's construction playbook makes mention of it. It is encouraged or required, it's not a compulsory mandate, but they have said this is what you should do. And that comes from the government. There's also the other information management documentation from the UK government, which says use the UK BIM framework. So I would say that it has gotten a very strong, very strong advocacy from the UK government to use it. And it's been tried and tested with the international community as well, which is helpful.
Yeah, and it seems to be more kind of a support, doesn't it, for information managers, people that have particular, in producing templates and guidance.
Exactly. It's not just about BIM. It's just dealing with digital data in the right way.
Yeah.
And indeed, ISO doesn't have much mention of the word BIM in it. It just talks about information management.
Yeah, using BIM.
Exactly.
Exactly. We've another question here. What do you think are the legal challenges with adopting ISO 19650 for SMEs? You know, if they don't produce the templates and the guidance that they're required to, you know, is that a breach? Is that a breach of a condition, or is it more like a warranty?
I think the biggest risk is if you sign up to something that says do some BIM.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly for SMEs, where their capability, the software they use may be limited. They may not have hardware to open or produce certain types of documentation. It's so important to be quite clear in what you aren't doing, but also listing what you aren't doing, what's extra and what isn't included in your fee. So there's no misunderstanding as to say, I'm not producing the BIM models, I'll feed into your BIM models, or I'll look at your COVID data sheet and make some comments about it, or I'm producing a BIM model just up to stage 2. And I think that's where often people fall foul. They just say, oh, it doesn't mention BIM, but I know you want me to do BIM models. We'll just go along and work it out at some point.
But if you have an existing contract, and let's say it's a lump sum fixed price contract, you know, obviously subject to some variations should the client require change, will these information standards like ISO add to the cost of the project? Because let's face it, you've got your existing contract framework, then you're adding in BIM requirements, which are very specific. You know, thou shalt produce this, this, and this, and these times. You have templates, you have guidance you have to follow. Are you actually making it more complicated?
It's worth bearing in mind that the ISO is only contractual. It's not a law.
It's not a law,
so
okay.
It's only implemented insofar as it's referred to in a contract. So if a contract says you will do things in the spirit of the ISO 19650,
okay,
or if it says you will comply with these sections of the ISO 19650, it's whatever your contract says. If your contract does require you to follow the ISO 19650 completely, I would say it shouldn't increase the amount of work you do, because if it's referred to, it's envisaging that you're working in a digital data environment anyway. And if you don't use a particular system, you'll probably be doing things twice.
Yeah, just to wrap up, I was actually at the BIM Coordinator Summit a few weeks ago, and I saw lots of evidence of BIM consultants, you know, who would be appointed by the appointing party to manage the information. Is that something you're seeing as well in the UK, that you know, you have a appointed party to kind of coordinate all the information on a project on behalf of the client? Yeah,
a client will often appoint a third party, particularly if it's a relatively immature client when it comes to BIM and digital data. They don't know how to do things or set up a CDE or what to ask for, or if someone sends them something, if it's the right thing. So it makes sense for them to have someone, in terms of the ISO, they envisage that this would possibly be done by the lead consultant, lead contractor. But it's no different, arguably, from having a project manager. It's just this is in relation to the data itself.
Yeah. May, thank you so much for being the sole recipient of the questions this afternoon.
No problem.
It was really excellent, and I hope the audience appreciate your efforts in that regard. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll get you over to Ireland at some stage. And it's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Take care. Thank you.